You're tearing the ass out of me right now.
What's that?
You just tore the ass out of me.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding. Myself, and you've got to listen to reason now. Hang on. So I'm here with John Kurzweg. Woo! And he has never really seen the wonder that is my little project studio. And now we've figured out a song that we're going to do, and he is kind of figuring out where he's going to use the mics. I might add, we're going to show my little mic locker now, which is the tools that John will be using. Yes, indeed. And let's see, what we got? Oh, yeah. This is where dreams are made of. It says Radio Shack, but it's not really Radio Shack.
Why not?
Because that's just the way it is. So what we have here is we have a Shure SM7B. We have one of a matching pair of Audio Technica 3050s. You can get these on eBay for $150, nothing special. We have a Shure SM81 small diaphragm condenser. Don't have two, sorry. And this is the second Audio Technica 3050. And then we have an AKG C214, which for those of you who don't know, this is just the cardioid pattern in a C414. Very inexpensive. You can get them on eBay very cheap. I happen to like it. Some people don't. We're going to see what John thinks. He used the real thing, correct me if I'm wrong, on my demos and stuff for my voice. And
well,
probably acoustic.
It was a similar mic. It was
no, not the 214, but it was a 414, right?
No, it was. But I know the one you're talking about.
I'm an idiot. I don't know.
I can't remember. It was one of their first cheap things that they did with it.
It was freaky. So anyway, these are. Oh, and there's an SM57 sitting on the snare, and a Beta 52 in the kick. And so for our mics, we have a Beta 52, SM57, AKG C214, two Audio Technica 3050s, and an SM81. And for mic pre's, I'll go ahead and just get this little task out of the way. I've got an FMR RNP, very relatively inexpensive. I do have an API 512 in a lunchbox. That's the only one that I have, and you can see it's very barren. Then we've got the Meek 3Q, which is pretty inexpensive. You can get one on eBay for about $150. The PreSonus Tube Pre, although it doesn't get used much, and it kind of looks like something you used when you pretended you were making a space shuttle when you were 6 years old. It's still surprisingly pretty useful at times. I don't think you're going to use that, though. And then we're running into an M-Audio Profire 610, so nothing spectacular in the way of onboard mic pre's or conversion. And we have the RNLA as an outboard compressor from FMR, and the RNC compressor from FMR, and that's it. So we're going to see what John does, little Mr. Fancy Pants. So I've introduced John to the mics. I've introduced him to the kit, and he's seen that he has some acoustic treatment to work with that he wants. He sees the room. He's setting up the mics, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to ask you, as you're standing here, I got my information about how to mic this kit off the internet, but John, I've noticed this, just him being here the last 24 hours, wizards use their ears. Like, John doesn't seem to care. I mean, tell me if I'm right about this. You don't seem to really care, oh, this is what people do or that or whatever. You just have an idea of how things will sound, and that's what you go by. Whether you're tweaking a plugin or an EQ or setting up mics, you're not really sitting here thinking, I will use the Glenn John technique. I mean, is that...
Well, I have some of that. I do think about, okay, I know that, these mics will work good for this. And some of that's the same way that I've read it or someone told me.
Or you've used it on,
or I've done it, and a lot of it is the more you do things and the more that I've tried different mics, that, I kind of know what I think's going to work right. But then once I put it up, I'll be starting to listen and I'll just start to move things around or, patch in an EQ or a compressor or whatever.
Now, if you didn't have me to sit here and hit toms and things, and you were your own one-man show, which a lot of us are, what would you do to try to efficiently dial in the drum sounds? Would you just tape little segments of the whole kit and maybe do a little tom, and then go back and go, okay, that sounds good, the tom sounds like crap, or how would you do that?
That's a good question. I would probably first I would probably bring each drum in to where, just for real quick, just to get a level. I'd probably, make sure that I could bang on it and see what the level was somehow. So if I needed to bring the snare in to the control room for a second, if I'm doing it all by myself, I need to have a general idea of what the level's going to be. And then I'll bring it back out, and at some point, I will just start to record, and then I'll record everything. Though I record it all together. We only have 4 inputs with Noel's system, so we're just going to do kick, snare, and then 2 overheads somewhere. We're gonna, so I would record that and go in and listen, and then start seeing what it's turning out, and then especially when you're doing the 4 microphone technique, where the overheads are going to be is going to be really crucial, to make sure you have enough tom-toms and everything. So we'll be kind of moving that stuff around and figuring it out, and it is harder when you're by yourself. I wouldn't, since I'm here working with Noel, I'm going to be tweaking the sounds in a little bit, maybe even EQing. He's got the Joe Meek EQ, right? I might use that, I might not. I might record flat, but I'll be tweaking things a little bit. If you're by yourself, you kind of have to force yourself not to do that as much. You have to just kind of go for a basic flat recording and just try to get it as good as you can. It is. So
you would say then, hey, if you've got the SSL waves plugins or some really good, pretty good EQs, maybe record pretty flat, not a lot of compression or anything, because then when you get in there, you can mess with it.
It's way harder to use compression if you're recording yourself and you can't see what's going on. Maybe if you had the equipment in here with you while you're playing, you could look at it and see what's kind of happening. But
I should point out, John is a perfectionist, as most wizards are, and the way I do things in here, I know the little areas where mics sound like crap. I know what levels on what mic pre's I can record at and not clip. And that's all one-man production stuff that I've just kept notes of, because a lot of times I'll get inspired or I'll have a certain window where there's no dogs or wives, and I'll have to come up here and have it pretty much dialed in. And I know that stuff from, okay, I can't go past a quarter turn on the API on the snare drum or it'll sound like crap. John, this is what I'm very interested in. John's just coming in here as a wizard with a great set of ears. I'm going to be interested to see how it all changes, because just spending 5 minutes with him last night on the SSL plugins on Pro Tools, he was like, and I was like, and so that was just 5 minutes of a plugin. So I'm very interested to see how this goes down. So I'm going to shut up now and let you be a wizard, and we'll take a little break.
This last part is with the compressor. This is with compression, and then I stopped it, and this is without compression. Are you using, is that a felt mallet on it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm going to move that in a little bit. And, I didn't check the phase.
I tell you what, I don't think my drums have ever sounded that good.
Really?
Now, I've never had the RNLA on the overheads, which
right.
is something I wanted desperately. So basically what we've done here, I just played some kibitzing on the kit. John has not checked the phase yet, which we're going to do right now.
At least, I just moved the kick mic, which might change part of that. But
when I say didn't check the phase, we didn't do anything different. That we knew the overhead mics were a different distance from the center of the snare. John wanted to hear what it sounded like. What is your wizard verdict?
No, it sounds good.
So you're not too worried about it?
I'm not too worried about it, but I'm going to check the phase because I definitely want to kind of know what's happening with that.
My drums have never sounded as good.
And one way that I do that is I'll use this plugin, and I'll put one there. And
Checking the subterranean phase.
And I'll flip the phase. In Pro Tools, this plugin is just called Trim. It's actually for gain staging, but I'm going to use it to check phase. And
I thought it would help you get girls.
Exactly. Exactly. And also, the positive of the overheads right there is happening while the negative of the snare stuff. So that's something that I could change now. There, I probably will, or you can change it later. It's just good to I often make notes about these things. It's common when I get stuff to mix from other people that it's common that there's something out of phase somewhere. And actually, I've suffered from this, even on some of the records I've done that have gone out to radio and been hits. Sometimes I didn't always check the phase.
So is it a case of hey, if we're liking what we're hearing and it works in the song, if nobody ever messed around with flipping phase in the mixing or bounce down process, nobody might ever really know?
No one might ever know. I mean, I'm not going to mention what radio hit I worked on where the snare is out of phase, but I didn't realize till later. And so I actually did more EQing than I really needed to do on the snare drum.
Okay.
So, but yeah, in a perfect world, you might want to get, but sometimes things are cool sounding out. Like you might get sometimes if the overheads are out of phase with the snare, you get a cool sound.
Well, sometimes not getting all the snare is a form of EQ, right? I mean,
yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
I mean, we could lower those suckers, I guess. So we're going to change everything now.
No.
Well, no, it will change everything. It's okay. That's like how we do this. I want more tom.
That's not the first time Tom's heard that.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying to you?
Wow. Who is this guy? Sing him some of your alternate... No, don't do that.
I'm Uncle Ray from the Upper Peninsula.
Let's see. So...
Say something, John.
Yeah, I'll say something. Okay, so we've actually moved the mics a couple times, and now we've got the overheads a lot lower where they're only a few feet above the tom-toms. And miraculously, I mean, we didn't measure anything. We just did it all by eye. Everything's in phase. I was able to flip the overhead mic pre's back to normal phase, and the kick, I checked the phase in here, and everything's sounding good, but I think the snare drum and the floor tom, in that order, need to be tuned a little higher. So Noel's looking for his drum key. We hope we have a drum key to tune the drums a little higher, and I think the floor tom sounds pretty good where it is. It's very low, but I think the snare has actually dropped since you started playing tonight.
Because I'm a panda, honey. I'm gonna have to find a drum key. I don't know where it is.
And so it might be time for a pizza break.
It's time for a pizza break.
Pizza break.
All right, we thought we'd spend a little time in the actual tracking room. A couple of very quick points. This is a 1970 Ludwig Sparkle kit. I've had the heads on it for some time. And one of the things that happened was John's a big stickler for tom-toms. He just that's his thing. And I agree with him. I think a really good tom sound really marks a recording. But anyway, I don't play the floor tom as much, but I do play the rack tom a lot, and obviously the snare. After we did an initial batch of drum sounds, John said, "Man, I really feel like the head on this is kind of dead." But he was like, we don't have enough time to really change it. So he did two things that were interesting. He EQ'd it a little bit, but he also changed where this overhead mic is. And when we got done making those changes, it sounded amazing. And it made me realize something that, you know, when you get to that level that John's at, you're just always hearing, and you know there's 3 or 4 ways you can deal with stuff, you know, and it's, I just, that would have been 2 or 3 or 4 hours of me going to the music store, getting a new head, figuring, then it doesn't sound like it fits the rest of the kit, I mean, all that stuff. And John just found this really wizard way to deal with it, and I thought that was cool. Secondly, I showed him the Glenn John thing where you have the right overhead facing the snare and the hi-hat just over the floor tom. And this mic would be behind me over my shoulder pointing at the snare. And they would both be 40 or so inches, but they would be the exact same amount from the middle of the snare. John just didn't even care about that. John knew what he wanted to hear. We did a little thing with it the way I had it. He said, man, I really want to hear more toms, you know. So he just came out here and moved the mics. And I was looking at it going, but John, don't you want to measure, you know, away? And he's like, let's just hear what it sounds like first. It might very well be out of phase, but maybe it won't. Well, we got in the control room, pulled up the little recording that we did, and it sounded freaking amazing. And he was like, yeah, that has a good amount of toms in it and everything. And I was peeping around the corner from the control room, looking out here going, how can this be remotely in phase? And he actually said, we're lucky they're in phase. Or, you know, they're in phase enough. And I was like, oh. Third thing that was interesting was I know that I can move the kick mic around and I can get more beater or, you know, more oomph from the back. But John actually took it to another level. He said, look, I'd rather get the snap from the beater from the EQ, whether it's subtractive or additive, than not have the mic in the best place to get the whole of the bass drum as far as the low end, which is really what the kick's supposed to do. So he had moved it up forward, didn't think he was getting enough of the power of the kick, so he moved it back, and he just said, look, I'll EQ it on the way in, and it'll be great. And it's by far the best my kick drums ever sounded. And he ran it through the Meek EQ. It's crazy. A third thing that was interesting was I usually put the 57 just over the edge of the snare, and I'm always listening. I don't want to hear too much of the rim, you know, the kind of, you know, it kind of sounds almost like a rototom kind of sound when you get to the edge of the snare. He not only moved it way further out onto the snare drum than I normally do, but he angled it in such a way as to reduce the amount of hi-hat that we were getting. So although you heard a little bleed of the hi-hat in the 57 on the snare, there wasn't near as much, and it allowed him to EQ the snare a little bit in a way that I wouldn't have. And I didn't know it at the time, but when I would try to do that before, the way I had the 57 on the snare, I was also EQing some of the hi-hat that I was hearing in the whole kit, and it sounded harsh and crappy. So that was another thing. He paid a lot of attention to getting the hi-hat out of the 57, which was very cool. So hope that helps you. So another cool thing that's happened, I kind of came up with this, but John made a point of it when we were starting vocals. If you're going to perform the vocals, you know, you need to make accommodations so that the person singing can really perform. And I mean that in terms of keeping the levels because maybe they're moving around because they're kind of singing in their own little concert. Or in my case, for this particular song, I found myself moving around a lot with my legs, and I knew intuitively from being upstairs that it would move the mic around. So what I've come up with is we have a little memory foam pillow, and I just stick the mic stand on the memory foam pillow, and you can, well, you can't see it here, but it really minimizes the amount that the mic moves. So John thought that was pretty cool that I did that. Another thing is, you know, whatever you need to do to make this SM7 or a 57 work, you should. Anytime you can use a dynamic mic in your studio is a great thing because it's minimizing air conditioner, it's minimizing outside noise, it's minimizing the washing machine being on the spin cycle, which has happened to me before. Anything you can do in terms of EQing, compressing, whatever mic pre you use, to use a mic like the SM7, it's a great thing for a home studio. It's just something we talked about. I tended to think, well, you have to use a condenser when you do vocals. And John said, no. A lot of people are singing through this mic. You just have to figure out what mic pre works with your voice, because I thought, no way will this work with my voice, but we figured it out, and I hope you'll hear the results. And yes, I like to cry. I don't want to return. See, here's the thing. There's a moral tagline at the end that doesn't make sense with me changing it to I like to cry.
Okay, what would say, tell me the words.
Okay, it was, yes, I like to drink, but think about the future. I don't want to be blurred through it, was the line. Well, yeah, that's what I've been singing, D-Bag.
Well, that's not what you just did, though, right?
No, I tried to John Kurzweg it. And we can see where it got me.
Well, let me hear the future line then.
All right.
Here you go. Whee!
I don't understand what you're saying, but it was great.
No one knows. Great. Well, I think that's fine to do that with the future thing.
Okay, so you want to just do a whole other take?
We're going to do 100 takes.
Yeah, I know we are, because that's how you do.
We can just do the verses if you want. Oh,
Man, I feel like I'm creeping right up on the zone, dude.
Well, should we just do some verses then, or what?
Produce me. That's gonna be.
Well, we're just gonna do some verses then.
Okay.
Do all that again.
Yeah, you had a little too much delay. It was really.
Is it better now?
It's a lot. Yeah, it's definite.
I don't know what happened. I didn't.
I know you like to cry. Son, I've got a feeling that you can just walk away. I don't understand what's going on.
Okay, from the. Okay, I'm sorry. I was pushing the wrong button here. I'm confused by your big knob. My fault. Like from.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
I was confused by your big knob. Nice. Perfect. Great. In your life. You know what I mean? Like, do the from your life.
So I'm like double timing it, really.
Yeah, something.
Okay.
Something. Well, here it comes.
Got a feeling that you can just walk away.
Okay. Oh, I do that all again after the second chorus. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I had it.
I was like really performing in front of.
It's my fault. Let me punch you in right after that.
The people that make Chex Mix.
Here we go.
But I like to see it pass. And yes, I like to drink and think about the future. I don't want to be blurred through it. So, John is doing vocal comps, and if I had a choice between being lit on fire and shoved down a staircase or doing vocal comps, I would take the staircase. You learn when you're me that you're not very good at Pro Tools because John is both creatively fast and technically fast. It would take me 3 or 4 times the amount of time to do what he's doing. I feel like I know Pro Tools pretty well, and I'm watching him, and I feel like I want to throw up in a vase. That comes from the fact that I know, oh, hey, you got another 12 years before you get anywhere near this, and then the other part is you just have to see the wizardry up front to see it and understand it. So anyway, we've been doing all this. We're kind of on the last leg. We've gotten basically a vocal take that I hope John's reasonably happy with. And then I'm going to mix it a little bit, but really John's going to mix it. And we're going to see how much of the final sound has to do with the mixing. As I told you earlier, John contended to me this morning that he could take my tracks and do a pretty good mix, which I think he maybe is being nice. But anyway, I've asked John, what are your final thoughts? And he said, why don't you go bury your own face in the mulch? So, no, he didn't really say that. What are your thoughts?
Well, we've had a lot of fun.
Yes.
It's been a long time since I've gotten to record with Noel. It's probably been, I don't know, 10 years or something like that. Something
Yeah,
like
12
that.
years.
Maybe 12 years, something like that. It's been a lot of fun. Noel, you still write great songs. And he said that, you know, you'll notice my studio playing is better, and it is. You know, something that happens when we all have our own little home studios. We actually get better at playing in the studio. So that was true, and it's been a lot of fun.
So I'm going to ask you, as a part of your parting shots, John's had really, really good gear. He was buying Neve and API stuff before he really kind of hit it big. He was playing cover shows in Tallahassee, driving a Chevy Nova, and he would come home at 3 in the morning and then tell me to be at his house at like 11. And it would always be an hour and a half of him sitting there sipping coffee before he got really ready. And then the UPS guy would show up and have some sort of piece of gear. But how would you know, the FMR stuff is known for being inexpensive but pretty darn good quality. The Meek thing, a lot of people I know like it on the boards, you know. M Audio has been much maligned, except I feel like I had an 1814 before, and so did you. To me, this is leagues above that in every way. The conversion, the onboard mic pre's. Of course, the API is the API. Of course, the SM7 is the SM7, but you're used to working on real consoles with real Neve 1073s and 1176s and all the stuff that we all want to record with. How would you say that this has affected what the final product?
Well, I definitely think that you can actually do a record with this kind of stuff. I was surprised. I didn't have anything here to shoot out the M Audio interface with as far as converter, but it didn't sound like it was getting in the way. It didn't sound like a bad converter like you had like 5 or 10 years ago, probably at that price level. The converters sound fine to me. I mean, I didn't have any of my good stuff to put next to it, but you know, I think it's the FMR stuff. That's how you say the company. I think all of that's good. If you need clean, transparent compression, really nice compressor, really it's great, and it can even kind of do some smacking around and stuff too. And then the RNLA, it colors stuff, and I noticed it affecting stuff. But you know, I want to say we got really good overhead recordings with are they called 3050s or
3035s? I said that earlier. It was not. It's 3035s. I was thinking of the
4050s.
Yeah,
so the 3035s into the really nice mic pre, into the RNLA.
Really nice leveling amplifier. Yeah.
And that's it. That was it for the overheads, and they sound really good. And the Joe Meek EQ, I really can't. I didn't spend much time with the mic pre or the compressor. I don't have a lot to say about this, but the EQ is very colored. You know, it's very cool. It's got a sound and an attitude, and I like that when I'm working on rock or pop, or you know, that really works. And of course API is really great if you want an in-your-face kind of mic pre sound. So
now let's talk about the monitoring real quick. Well, first of all, John called me the other day and he said, "Where is your computer?" I have a Mac Mini, and he's like, "You're running Pro Tools on," you know. Because when he got started on Pro Tools, you had to have like the Pentagon computer and like 15 external glyph drives and all sorts of stuff. But, you know, you've got these monitors. I mean, they're not expensive. I've got a sub. I use the sub with the HS50 Yamahas, which to me has made a huge difference. I don't turn it up very loud. And John agreed that it kind of gives you a sense of what the real low end on the recording is doing that it doesn't have without the sub. But I don't crank the sub up. I've got them decoupled from the desk, and I've got, you know, reasonable paneling. But I thought you might come in here, and it's kind of like David LaRose said, "Oh, it's like we're at Uncle Dan's, you know, recording," because it's sort of a suburban house. But I mean, do you feel like we've been limited by the room or the monitors or?
Well, first off, the way, you know, we did play some stuff from iTunes so that I could hear like what some music that I've heard before. That's the thing. It's like hearing some mixes that I'm familiar with. What do they sound like in the room? And nothing sounded like crazy out of whack. These sound sort of like NS10s. They remind me of NS10s, and the sub helps a lot because that's something that kind of sound doesn't have. And you know, the other thing for me is that actually half the records I've done were done in houses, you know, control room in the bedroom somewhere. So I'm pretty used to it for me. There are other guys that might not be able to make sense of this, but to me it all sounds pretty, you know, reasonable. Now, when I do my mix, I'll probably be doing it at my house, you know.
All in the box. No crazy shenanigans.
I'll do it. I have crazy stuff that I can do it, but we talked about for purposes of what we're doing, I'll do the mix in the box. And I don't mind telling people what plugins are happening either. I can just say, yeah, I use this on that or whatever. So,
but the point of that is you calibrate yourself. You orient yourself to, oh, okay, I know this record. Oh, okay, this is what the room sounds like.
Yeah, and usually what needs to be dealt with is the low end. Sometimes the high end, I would have asked Noel to turn the low end up more, which I think we did like maybe a dB or something when I came in and listened. And that's the thing is, you know, you just listen. And I personally, if I'm in a home studio like this, and if there are tone controls on the speakers, I don't mind messing with them. Oh, someone's like trying to get me on the phone.
Your pager's blowing up.
But
so I've got a Mackie Big Knob. Some people talk about it changing the sound. I don't think it really does. It's not like having Mackie pre's or any of that sort of thing. It's, but yeah, we've been using Pro Tools M-Powered 8. This is the first time John's worked with 8, so there's been a few times where you've had things that you didn't recognize. And the room, I was telling the people earlier that you took a lot of the paneling away and allowed more of the room, which surprised me. And I mean, how do you know whether or not a room's going to suck? I mean, do you clap? Do you cry?
I clap a little bit, but I listen to what it sounds like through the speakers. And you know, I mean, we still did leave up some of the paneling. We definitely had some of it up, and you already treated the room, and there's carpet on the floor. So it's not as problematic as some little smaller drum rooms or whatever. I mean, that's not a bad sized little, you know, whatever you want for a drum room.
No, I think it's pretty cool. So in closing, you know, you're going to hear the mix but really the mix, and you have a sense of what we've used and what we've done. One of the main things I wanted to get out of this was, besides just watching a wizard work in my little cheesy kitchen, if you will, I wanted John, who I've seen get record quality stuff from a variety of gear. I've already told everybody all your gear that from the Porta Studio to the Fostex to the ADATs. I wanted to see, like, okay, I've watched you do your thing, John. Now, what is, like, if you could just say to the people out there that are recording at home, what is like the one or two things that really make something go from sounding like, oh yeah, this kid did it in his basement, to wow? Because John was doing that on 4 tracks. You know, everybody was like, how does it sound like a record? You said compression. Yeah, you like to EQ on the way in.
Compression, and the early 4 tracks had compression built in them. You didn't know it was hidden in the circuitry. The old Tascams, I know they did. The first ones that I had, there were compressors built in. But yeah, compression.
So that helps it not sound like a cheesy home demo.
I think it helps if you can figure out what you're doing with it, you know. But yeah.
And we've talked a lot. This is one of the big things on the boards that people debate and call each other bad names about is, you know, is it the mic or the mic pre? John and I, independently and somewhat from my observations and him recording me, are, I think, a little bit of the school that you can have a 57 and run it through an API and a lot of things sound really good on it. You take the 57 and you put it through the Firewire 1814 onboard pre's, and it's not going to sound very good. So inferred from that is a really good mic pre is maybe a little more important as long as you have decent mics.
I think for rock and pop music, like if we're not talking about jazz recordings or classical recordings or something that needs to be really pristine and like glass and like, some classical guitar or something like that, I think the mic pre, for me, the mic pre is more important than the microphone. A great mics really help, but if I had a limited, which I used to, I took, had a very limited budget, when you knew me back then, and I just started slowly collecting mic pre's, I think, by 12 years ago or so, I had 2 APIs and 2 Neves before they went up astronomically. But, and that seemed to make a bigger difference than when I would use Neumann mics with, for instance, maybe a Mackie mic pre or something. To me it did.
I didn't realize too. I thought he had like the $80,000 AKG mic on the vocals for the demos that we did, and in reality, it was actually cheaper than the AKG that I have. Or you said it was the cheapest thing they had.
It was the first run of the C3000, the AKG C3000, which they improved later, and it never quite sounded as big. And so the early ones had a certain sound to them. I happen to have one of the first ones.
So would you say then, because I have this vision of you, because you've got all this outboard gear that you've accumulated over the years and great monitors and great mics. Are you surprised that you could get pretty good sounds on this stuff? Or did you think, well, you know what, I'll use my ears and I'll make it work as long as it's not totally crap?
I was pretty sure we would be able to do it. It's easier when you're going to tape, like even an old little Fostex tape machine. It's easier, I know, than going digitally, but I was pretty sure because that's what I came up doing. I haven't had to do this in a long time, where I was limited to project studio, type stuff. But
so what did you miss most out of your pro arrangements? Was it a 5th or 6th mic on the drums? Was it, I would have loved to have Neves instead of that?
Having one Neve mic pre might have made it a little bit more of a difference on the guitars or something, but I felt okay with everything. Certainly I wanted to go put more microphones on the tom-toms, but we only had 4 inputs, and in a way that was a great limitation. And it made me remember again, the few times I've done 4 mics on drums, there is something about not having a bunch of phase problems, where there's a bunch of tom-tom mics, and there's a hi-hat mic, and there's a ride cymbal mic, and there's a snare bottom mic, and there's an outside kick drum. You got 2 mics on the kick or 3. We just had 4 mics, and there's something about the way that sounds where the actual picture of the drums is really clear, and you really hear the cymbals die off, and you just hear the drums, and so in a way it's really good that we only had 4 inputs, because I probably would have thrown up more mics and screwed up everything.
Well, it's very interesting because I've heard this before with guys and that are pros. It's like we've got a really good sound, and yet it seems like there's this tendency where if you've got the mics and you've got the inputs, well, by God, we're going to use it. Even though guys like you have said, we were doing pre-production and I used 4 mics and everybody said how good the drums sound. Yet when you walk in the studio, it's almost like you're kind of expected to have 15 mics on the drums, And I don't understand why more people don't do that.
Yeah, it's hard, I guess, and maybe because budgets are smaller now, we're going to see more people do this. But yeah, I think back in the day, if I knew I had a pretty big record budget and it was a band and a lot was expected of it, it was like, I felt like, well, if I only throw 4 mics up, people are going to think I'm jipping them.
You're right. It's almost like you clock in like.
So. But part of it is you think, well, in mix I might need this, right, and I might need that.
See, and that's a huge thing that we've talked a lot about. It's the sort of American versus British mentality where, you know, you just record basic stuff with the idea that, well, we'll be able to play around with it all day and mix, and we have unlimited plugins and all that kind of stuff. I've become more of the thought, and John and I have talked a lot about this the last few days, of let's get it right on the way in so that by the time we go to mix, it's really more of just a little bit of tweaking and maybe some quasi-arranging, as opposed to all of a sudden now we've got to construct everything. I really think that the people I've known that have gone on and been successful from the kind of a project studio environment, they've all said something very similar, which is they learned to compress an EQ on the way in so that when they went to mix, they felt like they could assemble a really good mix. The other day when we were talking about this, John said, I don't know how you really would assemble a good mix if you didn't compress and maybe EQ certain things on the way in. Mm-hmm. And I you know, you got to have the ear and have the patience to do it, as opposed to sitting here all day and tweaking plugins. I think it's productive to do that. And it's kind of fun to challenge yourself on the way in to get the sound that you're hearing and then just do it. I think it stifles people to be in the computer all day and just, because, you know, it's sort of like, well, you know, we'll just do this and do that. And as you pointed out earlier, where you put the mic, how you mic, what you use on the way in, I mean, you can't undo that, you know? So other than that, I think I'm personally very shocked at how the overhead the drums sound. I've taken like 85 pictures of where the settings, where the mics are, how we had the drums tuned. So, well, cool. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing this, man. I learned a lot, and I hope you guys have too. And it's John Kurzweg.
It was a lot of fun.
Yay!